And now, prepare to boldly go where no meeting has gone before. With Prudential Financial VP Cloud Security and SRE Nick Corey and Director Cloud Engineer Abby Levitsky.
Howdy, folks. My name is Nick Corey, and I'm here to represent cloud observability and what we can do with Cribl and some of the stuff around optimizing data flows, partitioning today, and how that can help you guys save a lot of money.
And I'm Abby Levitsky, Director and Team Lead for the Cloud Observability team at Prudential, and I'll be supporting Nick in this journey.
All right, so what does cloud observability mean to us? Well, supporting all of our foundational cloud environments, first and foremost, right? Google Cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, OCI, maybe IBM for some of you out there, in a cost-effective, scalable, and seamless way, right? Across all regions, different geographies of the world, right? Not just the United States. I know we all like to live in the US East 1 landscape in the AWS ecosystem, but Japan does exist, Brazil exists, India, right? Even China. So what's on the agenda today? Architecture, how you can be compliant by design, have more resiliency and availability within your architecture using Cribl. Strategic partitioning, and how you can structure your data to have smarter workflows downstream to different systems. And then how rationalizing these data flows allows you to maximize value and minimize waste. So when we get to the conclusion, where we do our wrap-up of all the things we talked about, we're going to have actually a pretty long Q&A here. So as we're going through the slides, feel free to think about some things that stick out to you that you might want to dig deeper into and hold those till the end. Looking forward to them. All right. So as a friendly disclaimer before we begin here, the architecture and the partitioning that we're showing you here today, we vetted through AWS. So your mileage may vary in different cloud providers or in different ecosystems, so keep that in mind. And then take what you need, right? We're going to be talking about multiple things here, not just architecture in one context, partitioning in another, downstream stuff in another. Take any bits of those. They will help you as you go throughout your journey implementing Cribl at scale.
So I'm going to be taking you through some of our architecture here. And before we can even get to log partitioning, we have to start with Cribl Stream. So some of our main considerations when building our Cribl Stream sources, destinations, pipelines, all the good stuff in Cribl Stream are security, maintenance, scalability, which are normally the big three for everyone building anything. Security, in that we want to be sure that only the people who should have access to that data get access to that data. Maintenance, making sure that we're doing things safe and repeatedly across all of our environments. And scalability, as our company grows and as companies grow, your log volume is going to increase over time, especially if you went to the keynote this morning and heard about AI, that's only going to make it balloon even further. So keeping those things in mind when you're building your stream infrastructure is very important. So what you see here is kind of like a minified version of an architecture that we think does all three of those things. You'll notice that at the top, you might have multiple AWS accounts. You might have them all broken up by tier, dev, stage, prod. You might have hundreds of accounts. You might have tens of accounts. That's okay. No matter what. I want to just say that, as we spoke about in the beginning, the AWS is mostly what we're focusing on, so we're going to mostly be focusing on CloudWatch Logs in this presentation. That being said, the very first step in our architecture is getting those CloudWatch Logs to a central location, so they can be hooked up to Stream. AWS has this wonderful thing called subscription filters. Those subscription filters can be set up at the account level and will automatically subscribe to all the CloudWatch log groups in your accounts. It will then forward wherever you tell it to go. You can set up multiple destinations, but the destination we recommend is a Firehose. These Firehoses are deployed per region, per tier in our central logging account. And then once they go into the Firehose, they do a direct put to S3. Once they hit S3, an event will kick off and dump a message into SQS. And that's where Cribl Stream comes in. Cribl Stream will hook up to that queue, grab the message off the queue, find the corresponding item in S3, and then process that however you have your pipeline set up, and then store it in your destination, which for this purpose is S3 as well. And then that S3 bucket can be hooked up to Cribl Search in order for y'all to do your search. The key here being the breakup of your information by tier and region. By doing that, you're subscribing to that principle of security because you're not intermingling data across tiers. Scalability, so you have levers to pull for each tier. Maybe you don't want to keep your dev and stage data around as long as you want to keep your production stuff around. It gives you the flexibility to do whatever you personally need to do with that information. And so going even deeper, deeper dive into the actual Cribl worker groups, the way that we've got it set up here is basically every worker group accounts for a region. And within that worker group, we have separate resources for dev, stage, and prod. I would even recommend going further with making a worker group per region, per tier. That way, again, you have that flexibility to pull the levers wherever you need to without impacting any of your other environments. So now that we've got our Cribl Stream set up, we're going to jump into the actual strategic partitioning part. And so we have kind of a silly, metaphor here. If you think about it, you're putting all of your log, if you're just sending all of your logs to one S3 bucket and you're sticking it just at the root level in that bucket, it's going to be very difficult to, parse through all that information and find the logs that you're looking for. That's where Cribl Stream comes in. It's going to pick up those logs, and it does a lot of the partitioning for you in terms of date, time, year, whatever, and whatever custom partitions that you might need for your company. So locker on the left is sticking it all in root. Locker on the right is partitioning that data into actionable partitions. So this is an example of how you can partition your data and hook your data set up to be able to read very specific logs. In this example, we're splitting it up by account. So for every AWS account, there would be a data set for that account, and it would be hooked up to each of your buckets that are in each of your tiers and regions. So you want to see a real-life example? This is how it's set up today. Your data set is hooked up to multiple S3 locations. The buckets, again, are all split up by region, by tier. We've also done splitting it up by application. So maybe you want to get even more granular with your access model, and you want to break it up so that way only certain applications are accessible by the developers of that application. You can go even further if you have some sort of way to separate your applications by a unique ID. That's going to be pivotal in making this work. If you do not have a way to, say, hey, my product is product 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, however you're breaking up your products, then this will be much more difficult. So definitely keep that in mind when you are trying to set up your data sets and Cribl Search. So this, again, is just an example of sort of the same thing, except now it's got your custom, application number and your account, because it's going to be across accounts. An application could be deployed to multiple accounts, and you want to be able to account for that scenario. So you're like, okay, that's cool. Now, how do I give people access to that data so they can actually search it? So the key here is automation. It's kind of a pain in the butt to give hundreds of thousands of users access to Cribl Stream, but you can do so if you automate it. So what you're seeing here is actually a step function that our team has built in order to manage all of our SSO. Basically, we have decided, hey, we're going to break access up by account and by application. So we have standardized AD groups that we can automatically add in because they all have consistent naming. And then that automatically grants users access to the platform without them having to submit any access requests. So I'm a developer on application 1, 2, 3, 4. I get access to not only all the tools that I need to develop application 1, 2, 3, 4, but I also get access to Cribl and Cribl Search. So that's the key here. And I'm going to pass it back over to Nick to give us some final thoughts.
Thank you very much, Abby, for setting me up so beautifully. So rationalizing data flows. So how do we bring this all together to maximize value and minimize waste? Right. So this is probably something that you all are very familiar with if you're using Cribl today. And there's a lot of sprawl in terms of where things go, sources, destinations, pipes, how things get archived, right? There's usually not a unified location for that. Who consumes from these different observability tools downstream, whether or not, you have your Dynatraces, your Datadogs, your New Relics, your Elasticos, Splunk, it's a mess, right? So how do we rationalize that? So as a lot of you have probably done, right, which is why you're here, you probably put Cribl in front of some of that, right? So in this context, Cribl can really help to delineate where the traffic goes downstream, right? It can partition things into a unified archive, or it can fork them to multiple observability tools. And at least when you get to duplication, you understand how you can rationalize that into downstream platforms, but also know where you are duplicating it, right, as well. It allows you to enrich things at a central point, as well as filter at a central point, right? And now something that was mentioned in the keynote today was Cribl Guard. Something that we're also very interested in here. And that also allows you to data mask at a higher order of magnitude. Now consider that you're putting all of your data through a single pipe, and you can guarantee that it follows all the same masking rules downstream. It's pretty powerful. So what is unlocked by this architecture that we've been talking about, by this partitioning that we've been talking about? And flexible routing is one of those things, right? Now, if we partition amongst this product level, right, as Abby pointed out, or by account, or by any number of different cardinalities, you now can route those, and you know where different applications are going to end up downstream, where their observability platforms are going to be. This goes for SIM logs, this goes for app logs, you name it, right? This precise filtering will allow you to go back and also search across very specific sets in Cribl Search, right? So you don't have to go to a downstream location to figure it out. You will know by the data sets in Cribl Search. And if you haven't used Cribl Search today, data sets are kind of like buckets or indices, right? Like in Splunk. You'll now have precision to being able to search those. And then the agile replay, which we'll get into here, enables the ability to search and send and replay data downstream again into these different systems so that you can natively observe historical data, right? So in this example here, day one, let's say we have an API, right? A RESTful service. It's chugging along, logging application logs as you would. Now, let's say it's a HIPAA application, right? So for those of you who are familiar with HIPAA regulation, you might have to keep those logs for up to 6 years, right? Doesn't matter where you keep them, you just got to know where they are. Now, skip forward 560 days, right? Maybe a year and a half down the road, someone comes knocking at your door, auditor, right? Someone from compliance, maybe internal or external, and they say, hey, we need access to validating some of this application data related to this HIPAA application. Well, you can go and hunt for it in your archive, right? Because let's be real, that's not going to be in hot storage. No way. That's expensive. That's going to be in some archive storage deep in one of your downstream observability platforms like Splunk or Datadog or something like that. So you then have to unarchive it, which can take days, right? And you then have had to have stored it in that archive for all the time. So you're paying to store data that you may never use. But with Search and Send, and with this data partitioned upstream into native cloud object storage, you can go back into search exactly what you need, and then replay it back into the SIEM or into an application observability platform when you need it. So you can annihilate, just cut out the downstream archivals entirely. We're not talking filtering. We're talking you no longer have to store it there in the expensive place, right? So reducing hot log storage, right? So we talked about archival, but even hot logs as well, right? How often do you have somebody come to you and say, "Oh, well, I need to go back and search my stuff from 6 months ago"? Well, you get those requests, maybe once every few months from application teams, probably more from your security team, depending on if there's incidents, right? Now, wouldn't it be cheaper and more efficient to pull that in on demand as opposed to just now having a year of hot storage, right? Just in case something happens that we need to access the data. The on-demand capability of Search and Send allows you to do this at any time. It doesn't have to be for archive. It could be for even, we can call it warm logs, right? Logs that we think we might need on demand, but we still have to pay the hot price, right? So Search and Send allows you to kind of get around that, right? So you really only have to keep hot logs in the SIEM and in the application observability capabilities downstream. So, in conclusion, to wrap it up, rethink your data architecture, right? Abby went into good detail about this, about tiering, resiliency, redundancy, how you can scale, right? That's going to help make whatever you implement, at least in the cloud ecosystem, very scalable. Strategic partitioning. This is going to allow you to revisit your data when you need, at points in time, and also have granular access to it. Now, consider that in search, if you're doing a broad stroke search, it's going to take a little bit, right? But if you've partitioned your data properly into these buckets and these cardinalities, your searches are going to be lightning fast, right? But you have to do the diligence up front, right? And then this leads at the end of the day to cost reduction. Big cost reduction, right? Because now you can get rid of archive data. You can reduce the amount of hot data you need to have downstream. So, thank you for your attendance and hearing us out here on what we think is a cool solution and opening the floor to questions.
Hi, thank you guys. Can you tell us more about the SSO and how that ties into the access control for your buckets that you have set up?
Right. So with the SSO, basically, we've got the AD groups that are broken up by account and by application, right? And they're all persona based. So whether you're a developer, you're just a reader, you're data analyst, whatever, we have a role for you, and you would just subscribe to that role, or request access to that role. The SSO, those AD groups are mapped to teams within Cribl. So all of that mapping happens through that automation. We pull those things in. We have data sets that match the account name. We have data sets that match the application name. And so it kind of just is easy to map those together automatically through our automation.
And I think the key concept there is having platform transcendent or cross-platform groups, right? Birthright access. So this is something that you guys may or may not have a lot of influence over within your companies. I'd say be friendly with your ISO, your local security guys and identity teams. But having this concept of a cross-platform role that gives you birthright access once you are a part of an application team is very powerful. It will reduce huge amounts of uplift in terms of when people go onto teams or transition between roles.
Right, and that comes back to that security aspect of, hey, we want to make sure we know who has access to that data, and if you have a specific AD group for a specific product, and now you have to request 100 AD group access to 100 AD groups, that becomes more challenging. Right. So having cross-platform usable AD groups or broken down access actually makes that much simpler.
Absolutely. Next question.
So, One of the things that I'm really interested in is changing the way that people think about their data and, explaining that they have restricted access. You guys are doing it through your log partitions. How did your organization respond to that approach? Were there any politics, anything like that?
Aren't there always?
So it kind of addresses the concept of the identity access itself, right? So we were talking about, hey, we can automate mapping, right? That's cool. What does that mean, actually, though, in the platform? When you have a team in Cribl mapped to a data set, that means that persona, that individual, only has access to searching that data, which is a contract, right? We create a contract effectively within the platform. And I think that was very well received because it actually enforces best practice. A person cannot just go request random access to data sets within our platform. They're locked in by their job role, right? Now, if they have a transcendent job role, something like a cross enterprise role, like let's say they're an operations team that operates in global technology, they'll have more access to certain things, of course. But from an application team perspective, oh my gosh, attestation, entitlements. I think if you're a manager here in the audience, attestation's a nightmare, right? If you have to say, oh God, every one of my employees need access to all these AD groups, you have no idea what they are. You have no idea what they're correlated with, right? Because they're so disparate through different platforms. But if you can lock down again on this core concept of a transcendent role, you know that person is a developer for that product, and they should have access to stuff that relates. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Hi, very interesting stuff. Oh, there we go, thanks. Very interested in the search and send. We are in the midst of establishing different retention policies to minimize our hot search. Right now, we keep everything hot forever, which is incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
We know.
Because we have a multitude of teams that need data for different periods of time.
Right.
I'm assuming you guys send your data to Glacier and then Cribl Search allows you to go. Have you run into any cost concerns with having to retrieve that data from Glacier or users going in and doing too much of the archival search? Sure. And if so, how do you control against that?
That's why don't you take it out? You kick it off and I'll come.
So we restrict how far back our users can actually search. We say, hey, you're going to cost us a lot of money if you're searching back years. But obviously, there are going to be times during audits, there's going to be times where people are going to need to search back that far. So we have break glass rules that actually allow that, where we say, hey, it's an emergency. This audit's come in. We need to report on X amount of...
We went quiet. We'll have to project now. That's okay.
That's fine. I can talk loud.
Our 5-minute warning.
So we have those break glass roles that would allow us to actually, give people access to that data. So it would be very small windows, and we would be able to audit on that. Hey, what were you searching? What were you sending? So yes, there's a cost implication of going back in time and searching that far back, but if you need the data for an audit, or you need the data because there's a production outage and you need it from, a month ago because that's when the change was made, people can still get to that information. But the vast majority of your users are going to be locked behind, hey, you can only search 30 days back.
Right. And I think to add on to that, we don't allow our application teams to just arbitrarily go back in time and go as far back as they want. As Abby mentioned, they're locked in. If they do need something from further back, they would reach out to us, probably with a ticket. Now, we found that that's very uncommon for application teams. Usually you'll get a request once in a great while. And hey, if we need to increase the duration of how far back they can read for that particular team, you can do that. We can automate that. The security people are the ones who really have to go back, right? Like your SOC or somebody. And that's that break glass role. So normally they won't have access, but if they go through an approval process, they can immediately go and say, hey, I need to go back into Glacier and pull like 2 months of data for this application. Right now we have that application partitioning so they can get precision around what they're pulling. And I think that's actually the second interesting piece of what we're offering here through this architecture, is that you're not just searching over a broad period of time over everything, right? It's not like, hey, I'm just going to go through all these indexes and see what comes up for this application if we can find it. Since we've partitioned by application up front, they know downstream what applications they need to go and search, and that data is going to become accessible very quickly, right? Thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
I'm interested to know about your deployment in the worker group deployments, and how did you manage to, you obviously showed multiple worker groups. So wanted to know how did you manage to gather the sources? Did you lock down only X amount of sources, or did you leave it open? Hey, I want a syslog feed. Okay, for this worker group, let's enable it like that, or you locked it down. So whenever a worker group gets deployed, you deploy it with only these sources predefined.
Right. So when we deploy our worker groups, basically we do it also through all automation. So the same sources, same destinations, except a little bit tweaked depending on, the S3 location will be the S3 bucket that corresponds to the region and the tier that worker group is servicing. So that's sort of how we, break that down. Does that make sense?
And as a plug for Abby, she actually using Q, which is a open source capability for IAC, infrastructure as code. Her team put that together in advance of the Terraform modules being available that were launched today. So we're going to be looking at those to kind of transition a lot of our IAC.
Yeah, we're going to move away from that now that the Terraform provider's here. I've been waiting.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
All righty. So thank you guys very much for your time here. Really appreciate it. And we can loiter out in the hallway a little bit if you have any other questions for us. As we come off the stage, you can try and intercept us in the aisles, but appreciate your time and happy to help.
Yeah. Thank you.